We have a special guest with us this evening. She reached out to us via our blog on our website to let us know how the Geneva Girls' School changed her life. I asked her if she would come this evening to share her story. Linda Tart was a resident at the girls' school from 1961 to 1962 at the age of 13 and a half. Her early education was fragmented, and she never completed 7th or 8th grade. When she came to Geneva, she was the youngest girl placed in their high school program. She received all A's and was placed on the honor roll. I'll let Linda share her story on how her experience in Geneva was life-changing for her. Since then, I want to tell you, Linda has received her BA in psychology from Roosevelt University, a master's in educational leadership from National Louis University.
Yes.
She was a teacher, a longtime teacher. She holds a Type 10 in special education. She's also a licensed real estate broker for the state of Illinois. A true inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, Linda Tart.
I'm going to switch places with you. First of all, can you hear me now? First of all, I would like to thank Miss Emma for inviting me. And I would like to thank all of you all for being here and for listening to my story. My name is Linda Pitts Tart. I went in Geneva at the age of 13 and a half in January of '61. I was on the Willow Hall Cottage. Mrs. Minnie Miller was my house mother. Mrs. Breckenridge was her assistant. Mrs. Scott was the lady that took care of the kitchen, and she ran the kitchen like a fine dining room. Miss Pitts was a lady that would take over when one of them was absent. So she was like a substitute. When I went to Geneva, I had been abused and neglected. I mean, there's no way about it. And I had the marks on my body to show it. Prior to the time I went to Geneva, I had been institutionalized 4 times. 3 times at the Juvenile Detention Center and once at Chicago Parental School. I entered Geneva, as I said before, Geneva in January of 1961. I was on the intake, and where you take your physicals and your academic work and to see where you are at academically. I was in the 8th grade when I went to Geneva. I was subsequently placed immediately in high school. I had a reading score of 9.5. I had been scoring on the high school level since the age of 12, so in actuality I could have been in high school at 12. When I was in Geneva, I had science with Mr. Mancy, excellent teacher, typing with Mr. Watkins, who was a superb educator, Miss Williams, that exposed me to a lot of books, the Atlas. I think I read every book, every Hardy Boy book that was there. I had Mr. Franklin for English. He taught me how to do outlines and things of that nature and helped me with my writing skills. I needed to brush up on those. And I had another fantastic teacher there by the name of Miss Becker. She taught social problems. There was something special in all of my teachers. Mr. Mancy taught me about the body, how it works, the tapeworm. Mr. Watkins, my typing teacher, when I left Geneva, I guess I was typing about 70 words a minute. I will be forever thankful to Mrs. Williams for exposing me to literature, Mr. Franklin for helping me with my English, and I will be eternally grateful to Mrs. Becker. Mrs. Becker would talk to me. I guess I was her pet. And she told me that we were in the room once and we were talking, and she said, Linda, the president is sending troops over to Vietnam. She said, we have a young president. Does he know what he's doing? So she pulled the map down and she showed me Vietnam. Next to that map, there were other maps, and I began pulling them down. I seen the map of the world, the map of Illinois, the Indian Ocean, the Arctic Ocean, and I would go to the library and get National Geographics, and I would read about these countries. Now, getting back to Geneva, I'm quite sure you would like to know what a day's work was like. Well, we got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. We took a shower. We scrubbed our floors on our hands and knees. That was Monday through Friday. Then we got on our school clothes and we went down and ate breakfast, came back upstairs and waited to go to school. On Saturdays, it was basically the same routine, but only we could polish our shoes. We changed our linen. We got clean towels every day. We took the clothes over to the laundry, picked up clean clothes. In the summer, we would wash the windows, I never will forget, with water, vinegar, and paper. Everything in Geneva was sparkling clean. The meals were always nutritious, warm, and healthy. That's something I hadn't experienced at home, ever. I'm not going to say that I received a reasonable standard of care in Geneva. I received above and beyond a reasonable standard of care. All of my needs were met. I had to make an adjustment. Yes, I did. But once I had made the adjustment and seen Miss Miller, who was my house mother, as really a friend and a mentor, things began to change. Miss Miller was a house mother that always talked about pride, dignity, and self-respect. She instilled that in me and the other girls that would listen. She taught me about pride, dignity, and self-respect. She broke it down, and even though they overlap, they are still different components in a person's life. Miss Miller taught me about that and instilled it in me, but she didn't teach me about confidence. That's something I learned on my own. Being in Geneva and doing everything that they told me to do in school, and I excelled. I made all A's and was an excellent student. I was placed on the honor roll, and the day that they placed me on the honor roll was the day that changed my life. I had been always told at home that I was dumb, stupid, got beat all the time. I had marks on my bodies to show it. But then we talking about 1961. Juvenile justice had not came into the age of enlightenment at that time. Miss Miller knew that. We were taught, and she would always tell me how smart I was to be 13 and in high school, but that was okay. But when I went on the honor roll, I cried that whole day. I couldn't understand it. So before I went to bed that night, Miss Miller came into my room, Minnie Miller, who I will be eternally grateful for, and we talked again. She told me, Linda, what you didn't have, and I didn't know, was confidence. Confidence is related to self-esteem. I didn't have that. But once I made the honor roll, my life changed. I changed. I began to look people in the face and speak to them in complete sentences. I didn't hold my head down ever again. And that same confidence that I learned in Geneva, I had to take that with me for the rest of my life, because I ran into some situations where the odds were insurmountable. I had my first baby at 15, my last one at 18. And I was on welfare, and I worked my way off of welfare. But going back to Geneva, it was a wonderful place for me. It was quiet. There was no cars going, no cussing, no doors slamming. And the best thing, and I will always remember, is that I could eat as much as I want to. And that I did. As I told one of the ladies, I had gained so much weight within a couple of months, they sent me back to the dispensary to see if I was pregnant. Miss Miller came to my room that evening. I never will forget. She asked me, Linda, are you pregnant? I had just finished my kitchen training. I told her, no, you have a record of everything. She said, I know, but you're gaining a lot of weight, especially around the middle. So I said, okay. I went over there to the dispensary the next day, and I was examined again, and the doctor told me, you're not pregnant. I said, I know. He had looked and seen where I had gained a lot of weight. So after I finished with the examination, I went into his room and I sat down, and he was writing. As he was writing, he was reading. This is the certified that Linda Pitts is not pregnant. She has gained a lot of weight. So he put it in a little brown envelope, and I took it back over there to her. She never knew I knew what was in there. And within a couple of minutes, she came back to my room. She said, "You're not pregnant." She said, you gained a lot of weight. I said, "All of my clothes are too tight." I went to school that morning. I came back that afternoon, had lunch, went back to school. When I got off for the day, Miss Miller had new clothes for me in larger sizes, everything. I was so happy. Okay, so that's one of the experiences that I had in Geneva. But Miss Miller was such a jewel. Really, they all were. I remember one day talking to Miss Miller. I asked her, could I talk to her? She always had time for me. And this was the most important conversation in my life. I asked her, I said, "Miss Miller," I said, "you know, I'm in here." And environment is a word that I learned in Geneva. Environment, regurgitate, and chronological. I never forget those words. And I asked her, I told her, I said, "You know, Miss Miller, you talk about the right path and the wrong path. And I'm on the right path now. Being here is a good environment. Nobody is beating me. I'm going to school, making good grades, and not getting in any trouble because I never tried to run away as some of the other girls did." I said, "I'm on the right path now. But if a person is on the right path and they get on the wrong path, could they ever get back on the right path again?" And she told me, "Oh, sure." She said, "We all get on the wrong path at some time or other in life, and we do that because we make mistakes. None of us are without mistakes." And she went on, and I remember her telling me something about redemption. And that, I never forgot that because I was on the wrong path at some different points in my life, and I wanted to get back on the right path, and eventually I did. But I was so grateful for that. And she asked me, she said, why did you ask me that, Linda? I said, "Well, I'm 14 years old now, and I'm growing up. I'm on the right path here. But I know if I go home, I'm going to be back on the wrong path." She said, "Don't worry about that now because you're doing well." We had a lot of recreation in Geneva after we got out of school. We would go, and in the summertime, we would play volleyball, softball. Sometimes we would go to the gym and roller skate. Or some girls liked tennis. I didn't particularly care for tennis. And sometimes we would do some dancing in the gym. And so to me, it was just good times. Everything was there that I needed and I wanted, and I was well liked. I felt like I was a part of a family. Nobody ever beat me. Nobody ever touched me. Nobody ever hollered at me. I was treated with respect. Maybe it's because I was 13 and a half, and I know that there had been some abuses there. I've read about them, but it never happened to me. I had a lovely time there. I remember being on a cottage and looking out into the yard and seeing bunny rabbits go across the field. I wasn't used to that being from the inner city. And quiet, peaceful, serene. And that's some of the things that I remember and I appreciate about Geneva. But as the time went on, I knew my time was getting short, and that was always a concern for me of being sent back home. At that time, children were governed by the Illinois Youth Commission, not the Department of Children and Family Service. And their premise was, if you're here, you did something. It was always the child's fault, never the parents. But fortunately, in the early 70s, things began to change. And I'm glad that they changed. When I had to return home, that was the worst day of my life, next to death of loved ones, because I knew what I was going back to. My mother would come out there, birth mother would come out there periodically. We didn't get along well. I was in Geneva because I was being beaten at home, and I had the marks to prove it. When I got on the honor roll, as I said, that was something that changed my entire life. And I told Miss Miller, when she asked me why was I crying, I said, "You don't understand. I have pride. I'm glad I'm on the honor roll, but all my life I have been told that I was dumb, stupid, dirty. I would never be nothing. And I told Miss Miller I had to prove to my mother and myself I wasn't any of those things that she said I was. I shouldn't have been beaten. She said that when nobody ever liked me, and I told Miss Miller, you like me and I like you. I told Miss Miller I never want to see her again in life. She talked to me. I said, if she come out here, I'm gonna give her a piece of my mind, and maybe she won't come back. About 3 weeks later, she did come, and I told her, you know, Mama, you said I would never be nothing. Stupid, ugly, backwards, dim-witted. But I'm on the honor roll now. Everything you said about me, it wasn't true. You said that I would never make anything out of myself. But only me, not you, will make that decision. And I stuck by it. So I had a lot of fun in Geneva. The girls and I, we all got along. I had my best friend in the high school was Pamela Wurzakowski. We had science together, and we would play just a little bit. And she would call after I got home. She called me a couple of times, and we talked. And then once she called, my mother answered the phone, and she told her not to call back there no more. Not to call back there anymore. She didn't, but that was one of my best friends in there. Miss Miller used to tell me, well, Linda, you're a smart girl. You're a smart cookie. She always praised me. When I was in my typing class and I got up to 40 words a minute, I asked for permission to take my binder out of the school and to show it because I wanted my counselor to see it and Miss Miller and everybody else. And I showed it, and everybody was very happy and proud of me. And Miss Miller, when I showed it to her that afternoon, that morning, she gave it back to me, and she was smiling from ear to ear. She said, I told you you was a smart girl. She said, you're doing good. She said, and I heard that you're very smart in school. She was just a fabulous woman. I didn't know how she really felt about me. I know she would tell me that I was smart and what have you, but I didn't know that she actually felt that way until about 5 years later. I seen a girl that I was in Geneva with. Her name was Joyce. And this was in 1967, early 1968. She was in Chicago. She was from Cairo, Illinois. And we were talking about Geneva. She told me what had happened to some of the girls that was there. She told me Miss Miller had died. And as we were talking, she was there when I was released, and the day that I was released, which I said just a day that I would rather forget. But Miss Miller, she walked me downstairs. Her, Miss Scott, Miss Breckenridge, and Miss Miller was not the touchy type. Maybe that was against the rules, but she gave me a big hug, and she told me, "Bad, remember the things that she taught me." So I ran, from the college, and right before I got out of sight, I ran back. And everybody said, she coming back, and the girls, some of them was downstairs, and some of them was at their window saying, bye, be good, and what have you. So I ran back. And Miss Miller, she said, well, what are you doing back? I said, I want to get my scarf. She said, don't worry. She said, where you going, there's going to be a lot of scarves. So Joyce was standing there. She was one of the ones that gave me a hug. So when I saw her, we were talking, as I said before. And she said, Linda, do you remember when you went back to get the scarf? I said, yeah. She said, when you left the second time? I said, yeah, I remember. She said, well, as you ran out of view, Miss Miller said, that girl is going to do some incredible things in her life. I know she always thought a lot of me, and I thought a lot of her, but I didn't know she felt that way. And the pride, dignity, and self-respect that she taught me, once I got home, I got off that path. Things happened. The environment was not conducive to learning. It was an environment that was really, really a bottomless pit of ignorance, poverty, and promiscuity. It was what I wanted. I didn't want to live my life like that. And I remember what she always said about the pride and the dignity. And as time went on, and as Miss Emma read, I went back to school, and I earned my degree. It took me 12 long years to get a bachelor's degree. I graduated from Roosevelt. I had 2 children in private school, and as you know, Roosevelt is a private school. And through all of my trials and tribulations, I remembered that experience in Geneva and how positive it was for me. And the day that I got my college degree, I felt pride, dignity, and self-respect. When they put my degree in my hand, I looked at it and I couldn't believe it. And as you all see, I can cry. I started crying, and it was. I saw, all the things that I had went through, the degradation, the beatings, everything I had went through. And when I looked at my degree, first person I thought about was Miss Miller. And I could visualize her, and she was smiling. And I could say, I said to myself, I have gotten back to that plateau of pride, dignity, and self-respect. Now, there's a lot of things that I could say. And as I said before, I had a wonderful time in Geneva. I was fat. I had acquired a taste for half and half. And I would mix my milk with half and half. We had all kind of food there, food that I had never had, like tapioca pudding, rhubarb. We had cabbage with potatoes and carrots in it, strawberry shortcake, apple sauce, apple pie, baked apples, corn on the cob. You name it, we had it. And my job in the kitchen was taking care of the starches, so I cooked the macaroni and cheese. We had potatoes every day, and rice. And we could eat as much as we want to. And I guess that's the reason why when I came out of Geneva, I was wearing the 16. Okay. I stayed in Geneva a year. The regular stay was 6 months or 7 months. But Miss Amanoff, I would go see my counselor every month. And she was always glad to see me, and I was always glad to see her. And she knew that I was doing well, and she knew that there was a lot of dysfunction in that home. And after I graduated from 8th grade, she told me I could go home. I told her I don't want to go. She said, okay. Then the next month she called me. I said, I don't want to go. I don't want to leave. Then one day I said, well, Miss Amanoff, if I got to go, could I go to a foster home or could I go to another place like this so I could finish school? Because if I go home, I'm not going to be able to finish school. And she said, well, Linda, your mother has to make that decision. But we're talking about 1961. This is 2016. It wouldn't have been that way today. And, I mean, Geneva was beneficial to me socially, emotionally, nutritionally. And it gave me a foundation. And I found the confidence in myself, even though when times was rough, I still had that confidence. And it turned my life around. That's all I can say about Geneva. Nothing but good things, but one bad thing. The room was cold in the winter, and they were hot in the summer. There was no air conditioner or heater in the room. That's the only complaint that, I would have. Other than that, everything was fine. They kept me clean. I showered once or twice a day. I always had clean clothes. Personal things that girls need, and you know what I'm talking about. They were always there, and they were there in abundance. Nobody ever told me to put that bread down. Nobody ever told me that milk is not for you. Nobody ever told me get your hands off those eggs. Never. And that's what I endured at home.